Hello and welcome to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. I'm Alex.
I'm Julio, and thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, head over to Apple Podcasts to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Help promote the algorithm and spread the word.
You can also find us on SoundCloud to subscribe and review, and don't forget to visit our main website, wearethecontrarians.com.
Follow us on Twitter at Contrarian Prime, and to like us on Facebook, visit facebook.com/Contrarian Prime.
And if you have the willpower to keep up with our pretentious ramblings, you can follow us individually at Contrarian Alex for myself and at Ovnio for Julio. That's OVNIO.
Now, time for the podcast. All right, I'm recording for Contrarians Corner for Whiplash.
Hello, and welcome back to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. My name is Alex, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host and friend, Julio. Julio, it is not quite yet Christmas Eve, but Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, and honestly, this episode is supposed to drop, if all goes well, December 31st. So in a way...
A Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to those of you listening. You should be quarantining, so listening to a podcast as midnight approaches sounds like a pretty safe activity to celebrate the end of 2020.
I didn't even think about that. I was watching 30 Rock the other day, and it was like a New Year's episode, and I was like, Jesus, so there's going to be really people that are trying to go to Times Square for this shit. But,
yep.
Not me.
Somebody tweeted a picture of a Peruvian airport earlier today, and it looked like, people were wearing masks, but that's about the only thing that they were doing that was sensible. They were just packed back to back.
Yeah. I was talking with this girl on a dating app, and she was like, yeah, I'm flying home for Christmas. I was like, well, that at least prolongs our chances of seeing each other by quite a bit of time. So whatever the case, yeah, it's a lot easier to just stay home. I know it sucks. I know you want to see your families, but staying home by yourself and getting drunk and playing video games is very underrated. I think people don't have an appreciation for that. Or listen to a podcast like this one and watch the movie that it's about. Or any one of our podcasting friends. Listen to one of their podcasts and then watch that movie. Speaking of podcasting friends, this was requested by someone in the podcasting universe, correct?
That is
one of our patrons?
Yeah. Podcast Universe and Patron Universe, Katie and Oti from the For Your Reference podcast, which, Alex, this is, I guess, a minor bit of real talk, but they don't like this movie. So they submitted it, I know, because even if we end up liking it, we'll still get to talk shit about it for the first part of the show. So they win either way.
It's win-win for them. Well, KT and OT, this is their request, so we hope you guys enjoy, and we hope everyone else tuning in enjoys. Now, if you're a returning listener, we thank you. If you're a first-time listener, thank you for joining. Our returning listeners, give us a moment here while we explain our gimmick to the newbies here. Here on the Contrarians, we like to rage against the Rotten Tomatoes machine, as we say. Like to find a movie on Rotten Tomatoes that is highly rated, usually about 85% and above, often known as certified fresh. Make a case for maybe why it should be taken down a peg, maybe why it ain't so high and mighty. And then on the other side of the coin, on our alternating episodes, typically we find a movie that's about 30% and below, one of those nasty green splotches known as rotten, and make a case for its positive merits. And there is a lot to be found, hence me purchasing Howard the Duck on Blu-ray after our last episode.
The best advertisement. Money doesn't even have to buy you because we do this for free.
Yeah, I was like, when we were editing that, I was like, I got more mad than I did when we were recording. I was like, I've lived my whole life thinking this was some abysmal failure, and I was like, this movie is just a perfectly cromulent time. I had a great time watching it.
That was my biggest takeaway. I was like, what else has public opinion lied to me about? What other terrible movies are actually perfectly fine movies that I would actually enjoy, not just watching, but owning?
See, like we talked about on that episode, though, the other movies that people told me to stay away from, Battlefield Earth, Geely, yeah, they were right. Those are like abysmal failures that have no redeeming quality. But yeah, man, getting that Howard the Duck Blu-ray, the retrospective little documentary on it and everything, fantastic. And the transfer was miraculous. And like I sent Julio the picture of it. I guess the Blu-ray I purchased, I got it off Amazon. It was like $7. I think I bought it the night we recorded. I was like, you know what, this was fine. I was reading the copyright and like the basically the timestamps on the back of it, and it looks like that Blu-ray was released in 2016. It's still through Universal, but it had as I sent you the picture, Julio, it had the Marvel logo on the back that's used on all the Marvel movies now. I let out a boisterous holler when I saw that. So that's what we do here on the Contrarians. We love what you hate and hate what you love, and we find cases for them either one way or the other. And today, with the movie Whiplash, is it 2013, 2014, Damien Chazelle, I believe is the gentleman's name, written and directed by, now in 2020, we can refer to him as an Academy Award winner. Not at this point in time, though. He was still kind of fresh to the game, and he entered the fray here, the 2014 film landscape with Miles Teller and J.K. Simmons. And
introducing J.K. Simmons.
And certainly not least of which, Paul Reiser, just, doing a favor for a friend in this movie. And this baby is rated 94%, or comes in with a grade of 94%, a critical reception, whatever terminology you want to use, on Rotten Tomatoes. So, for this episode, we're going to be taking it down a peg and bringing Miles Teller back to earth, bringing him back down to the Fantastic Four level of the world. And with J.K. Simmons, many, many moons ago, we talked about him and the ill-fated Juno. So it's a return to form for him here. With all that being said, 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. Julio, what were the critics saying about this?
Critics were over the moon. I don't know how many of these reviews are from after the movie won Oscars, and I'm assuming it got like an award season re-release. I don't know how many critics jumped in bandwagon after that, but picked a few fresh quotes from the Rotten Tomatoes website, starting with Yuri Klein from Haaretz, who says, Whiplash is cinema as a duel, fought not in an army barracks or an athletic training camp, but in the room where the orchestra rehearses its jazz numbers. That sounds pretty boring. Alejandro Aleman from El Universal says, Whiplash is the most exciting thing that has happened to us in 2015. It came out in 2014, though.
That was after the fact.
Also, the golden times when, pre-2020, when a movie's release was the most exciting thing that had happened anywhere in the world.
I'm trying to think what the hell else came out in 2014. Guardians of the Galaxy. That was more exciting.
And there you go. Because it had a Howard the Duck cameo at the end.
Exactly.
There you go.
The Hobbit, Interstellar.
Alistair Ryder from Cinemo says, Dead Poet Society for Sociopaths. Which I pulled this quote because we were talking about Robin Williams in his serious roles a couple episodes ago. So, I guess, can you imagine Robin Williams playing the J.K. Simmons character on Whiplash?
I would say no, but I mean, I've seen 1 hour photo, so I know he can pull off a litany of performances. I mean, probably. Robin Williams was extremely talented, so who am I to say he couldn't have done this? Problem is, he still would have had some likable quality to him, and I've been like, yeah, he's not that bad.
I mean, J.K. Simmons tries to be likable a couple times here. Whether he succeeds or not, we shall discuss. And finally, speaking of Simmons, Asia Frey from Lagniapi, Mobile, Alabama, says, it takes Simmons as an actor from memorable to unforgettable. Was J.K. Simmons memorable before Whiplash? Or is she already overselling him?
I mean, yeah. for Jameson. He entered our hearts and stayed there with his performance in the Spider-Man franchise.
So he was in the Lady Killers. So yeah, I guess so.
All right. Julio, did you see this movie when it was first released?
Yes, I did. But speaking of Juno, I get the feeling that I watched it before it became Whiplash. Definitely watched it before he won the Oscar, before Simmons won the Oscar. And I want to say that I watched it just when it was just a movie, before there was any serious buzz behind it. And I liked it as a release, but I remember that was just the Juno effect, right? It when all the accolades came later, it was just I was done with it. I had moved on.
Yeah.
I was rooting for Ethan Hawke in Boyhood.
Yeah, I watched it when it first came out too, or around that time. So this time around, Julio, how did you watch it? Do you own this movie? How'd you come to see it?
I don't. I thought I was gonna have to rent it, but it turns out that it's available on IMDb Pro, which I guess I have as an attachment to my Amazon Prime account. So I watched it for free with a handful of commercial interruptions, which they were not placed ideally. I imagine that the people behind IMDb Pro, it's not like they're watching the movie and thinking, okay, this is a good stopping point. Sometimes you'd be like in the middle of Paul Reiser saying something profound. You just get a commercial. But that's fine. I didn't have to pay for it, so I took it. And I already seen it. You know, if it was a movie that I hadn't seen before, I would have forked $3-4 and just gotten an actual rental. But you know, for a movie that I already seen, IMDb Pro did the job. It was the transfer looked good. The sound quality was good. I mean, as much sound quality as you need for the music that they're trying to play in this movie. It was all right. No regrets. How about you? Do you own it?
Oh, no, I actually watched it the exact same way you did. I watched it through Amazon Prime on IMDb Pro, sponsored by Amazon or whatever it was.
God, if we had known, I wonder if we could have compared notes about the commercial breaks.
Well, my main thing with the commercial breaks was they were on a different audio casting than the movie, and so like the commercials were way louder than the movie itself. So I'd have like the volume turned up to listen to the movie, and then the commercial for Mucinex or whatever the fuck, some cat litter came on and was like bah bah bah. So yeah, but same thing. Transfer was fine. I thought I owned it, and then I went to my shelf and I was like, may have to fill this gap. So Whiplash is not in the collection, so yeah, fortunately I hopped on. I was able to view it for free, but as Julio had stated, I'd seen this a few times before. I had forgotten how fast this movie flies by. I can't make up my mind whether that's a good thing or not. But it is the movie, the story of Andrew Neiman, played by Miles Teller, who we've discussed on this podcast before, but I don't think he's been featured in a movie we've covered. Is that correct?
I think so. And I'm guessing you're referring to Spectacular Now? Because I can't think of any.
Yes.
And I guess we've made fun of Fan Stick a few times, but this is going to be our first shared Miles Teller experience.
He's something. What do you think about Miles Teller?
Did you ever read that interview that was floating around a couple years ago where he called Joaquin Phoenix Joac numerous times during the interview? He, it went viral kind of.
Like as a joke?
No, he was being, well, I don't know. That was the thing with the interview. It went viral because it kind of painted him as a douche. Kind of like a pretentious, like the kind of guy that's calling Joaquin Phoenix Joac as a serious thing. But when I read it, to me, it said a lot more about the interviewer, because the interviewer seemed to come to it, or it kind of read like a hit piece. Like, I don't like Miles Teller, so I'm going to interview him, and I'm going to make him sound like a complete idiot. So I don't know. I mean, you have to read it and make up your mind. But that was my main. It was probably right after Whiplash, because everybody was talking about him then. That's really the only other bit of insight I have into Miles Teller. I've seen him in a couple of movies. Like I said, Fan Stick. There's that movie with Jonah Hill. I think it's a Todd Phillips movie, actually. An Oscar grab that went nowhere. You know what I'm talking about? They're like
War Pigs.
Yeah, they're like
or War Dogs.
Dealers.
Excuse me. War Pigs is the Black Sabbath song.
I'm pretty sure they play it in the movie. That movie is whatever.
There's no way Todd Phillips would leave something that obvious on the table.
But yeah, it's. I mean, I don't know. My strongest memory of him is his performance on Whiplash. Therefore, I think of him as kind of an asshole. You have a different take on him, I guess, maybe, because I don't know what his Spectacular Now character is like.
Oh, Spectacular Now is great. It's rough for someone like me to watch, but it's a great movie.
Is he more likable there than he is here?
No. Sutter Keeley is not a likable character, which that's what makes that movie kind of confusing. There's really not a character aside from Shailene Woodley that you're rooting for. But my first experience,
that sounds like Whiplash.
My first exposure to Miles Teller was. Did you ever see Project X? Do you remember that movie?
No, but
you don't remember it?
I haven't seen it. No, I know exactly.
Oh, okay.
Is that Todd Phillips as well? Or is it just a Todd Phillips wannabe?
It's produced by Todd Phillips. And Todd Phillips' name was all over it because he produced it.
Okay.
And it's not good. It filled a generation of kids with the wrong idea of what a good party is. But it's a movie that had a budget of like $10 million and made over $100 million. Anyway, tying this back into what we're discussing here, I don't think any of the actors in that movie really went anywhere to speak of.
Except for
Miles Teller.
Yeah.
Who he plays himself in the movie. Like, looking at his filmography now, he was in 2 movies before that, and it looks like he had a couple of shots on TV beforehand. But I remember watching Project X. That's still when I was working at the theater. And so, like, it's like a found footage type movie. Like, it's not like an actual movie. It's like these fucking jerk-offs filming their last day of high school or whatever the fucking plot is.
I knew it was found footage. I didn't know what the conceit behind it was. Miles Teller plays Miles Teller in Project X? Like actor Miles Teller?
Hold on. I'm getting to it.
Okay.
And slow down, buddy. So, like, they're at the store buying beer or smokes or some shit, and they're like, holy shit, that's Miles Teller. And they go up, and he's not playing an actor, but he's apparently playing some, like, high school legend that's gone to college since. Fucking Jerry O'Connell in Can't Hardly Wait. That's like Miles Teller's character in Project X. They're like, oh my God, you're a legend, da 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 da. And they invite him to the party, and he ends up showing up and doing a bunch of ecstasy. And he's like this, everyone's like, oh my God, it's Miles Teller. So, like, right away, I remember getting online and be like, am I supposed to know this fucker? And being like, the egotism of man here. This kid thinks that, like, he's some hotshot or some. I guess they pegged him as like the golden goose, and he was here to lay all the golden eggs. And so, like, pretty much everything he did after that, I always revert back to, like, the first movie I saw him in. He was some celebrated cameo, having no filmography to speak of beforehand. And so, coming into Whiplash, that egotism kind of bleeds through, and not just necessarily from Miles Teller the person, but definitely the character that he plays in this, Neiman. Right away, I forgot that, like, our 2 main characters are introduced immediately in this movie. And something else I never caught was, I don't know if you caught, the drum, like the sequence he's playing at the very beginning of this is the last he plays in the movie.
Well, I mean, I'll take your word for it, because to me it just sounded like noise. There's a lot of musical sequences in this movie where I don't understand what the goal is. Does it really require talent to bang on the drums? It's like, I understand. I guess my bigger point is, with respect to all drummers listening to us right now, but it sounds, at least if you watch Whiplash, it really looks like drums on their own don't do anything. It's like, even when you build a whole movie around them, if you take away all the other musical instruments, it's just some dude banging on a drum really fast, or you know what I mean? Like, the movie opens with Miles Teller making noise, and the movie closes with Miles Teller making noise. The only time that there's some relief is whenever the trumpets or the piano comes in. I don't know, maybe like on our greener grass episode, I'm just revealing myself as a traditionalist when it comes to music, but drums on their own just don't do it for me. So I was waiting for the dialogue to come in, when this first sequence started. How can you even tell that it's the same thing that he plays at the end? Is it his like Spartacus piece?
It's not like the opening. It's not like that thing you do. It's no, it's he's practicing the same thing that he nails at the end of the movie. I just never caught it before because I've watched the closing sequence of this movie, bleeding into Real Talk. I've watched it a dozen times. Sometimes I'll just get a hair to go on YouTube and watch it.
I mean, I can tell you. I mean, I've seen this movie all the way through twice, and the one thing that has stuck with me is the beginning of Whiplash, like the dan, 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 dan. So that I can do. Maybe I'm just more of a trumpet man than I'm a drums person, but that to me at least sounds like a melody. Some dude just hitting different surfaces with sticks. Just I don't know, not my tempo.
Not my fucking tempo. So immediately introduced to the villain of this movie, the Darth Vader here to fucking Neiman's Luke Skywalker, Terrence Fletcher, described as a ruthless jazz instructor, played, of course, by J.K. Simmons, who somehow finagled an Oscar out of this shit. Beat out Robert Duvall, Ethan Hawke, Ed Norton, and Mark Ruffalo to win an Oscar for his performance of just yelling very offensive and derogatory sexual and racial slurs in this movie.
That's how the Academy works.
I was about to say a white guy yelling racial slurs. That's basically a guaranteed Oscar right there.
Yeah, I think that's how they balance the, Best Picture will go to the prestige period piece, but Best Supporting Actor, they'll give to the bad boy.
Yeah, exactly. They'll give to the white man doing some sort of cultural appropriation or just playing a white man in a very extreme context. And here you have fucking J.K. Simmons trying to dress like Danny Zuko. He's got his white fucking, or not even white shirt, it's his black skin tight shirt tucked into black jeans, wearing a black leather jacket, thinking he's the main cheese here. J.K. Simmons seems like a cool cat, so I'm just going to more or less put this on the shoulders of old Damien Chazelle here for writing the Terrence Fletcher character as a man who's way past his prime but still thinks he's hot shit. But the mind fucking of this movie begins right away. So this one's going to be a little bit different. I was talking to Julio before we started recording. My notes are fairly minimal because this movie isn't heavy on what we call plot. The plot of this movie is basically Neiman, Miles Teller, is this young drummer at the Schaefer Conservatory in New York City, and he wants to be the next Buddy Rich, next, one of the great drummers, the next Tommy Lee, the next Animal, take your pick, whoever you want. And
there are other ways to become the next Tommy Lee.
There truly are. Be a white guy with a big dick and marry a smoking hot woman. That's a way. Women. So, Neiman wants to be this all-time jazz musician. His teacher, he's like in the regular band, and then there's the, what do they call it, the pro group? What are the difference in rankings here?
I don't know. They have the fancy name. What is it? It's studio
band. That's
studio
it.
Band, there you go. But they're not a studio.
So
that's just the name.
It's just the name.
Yeah, it's like if you heard about Universal Studios, but then you had to do the caveat of like, well, it's not a real studio. That's just its name.
It's just a theme park. So he wants to be a jazz musician, best drummer ever. And then you have Fletcher, who's this instructor who's never had a student. He feels, he wants to have, who does he attribute or name drop? Charlie Parker. He wants to have the next Charlie Parker. That's basically the story. Things fall in terms of, secondary characters and swerves here and there. But the basic story is this kid wants to be good. This instructor wants a good student, but he goes through these very intense, John DuPont, Marv Marinovich type techniques to try to mold these people. And it creates this chaos. And, Miles Teller cries and he bleeds a lot. And J.K. Simmons uses the F word and demeans him and slaps him and uses his life story to kind of throw it back in his face because he feels that his extreme styles and coaching techniques are where it's at. So that all being said, that's essentially the plot. You can imagine the ups and downs we go through. It's not a movie like Howard the Duck, where there's meticulous note taking to ensure that we leave no stone unturned in discussing the plot of this movie. So
I think
if it seems like
the only thing that I would add, in case it hasn't been made clear yet, is that both characters are pretty much despicable. In case that the whole story about Miles Teller, the whole prequel that you gave us, didn't underline that point, and then what we've said about J.K. Simmons' character. I mean, they're both dicks. In 95% of the movie is focused on them. Every now and then you get a brief breather with other characters, but it's just two extremely unpleasant people interacting back and forth. That's what the movie is. And you can hear Damien Chazelle thinking that, to me, the big pitfall is in this movie is that Damien Chazelle got confused and he thought that being an asshole was being cool. You know, when J.K. Simmons is just being a major dick, it's shot and it's staged as in like you're supposed to come out of those scenes thinking, man, but isn't that cool? Isn't it cool how he dominates the room? And then when Neiman does something, when Neiman's a dick, you're also supposed to think like, oh man, isn't it cool that this kid's asserting himself and just telling people what's what? The answer is no, it's not cool. I don't want to watch a movie about this.
Basically, old Damien watched Before Midnight and then didn't know there were 2 movies before it, and he was like, this is brilliant. No likable characters, and we don't really have much of a reason as to why they hate each other. Let's go into it. So we set the table by explaining this about the movie, just to say, if it seems like we're kind of jumping around here and there, typically what we like to do with movies is break them down beat by the plot. You know, no pun intended here with a movie about fucking drumming, but it's... we may be kind of jumping around because, again, this movie's a bit light on plot. I don't think it's not a coincidence fucking Damien didn't win best screenplay for this movie.
It's heavy on musical numbers, though.
It is. I just imagine like the last 10 pages of the script were like it's the 10 pages before the end of the script. It started with Neiman begins drum solo. Next page, continues drum solo. Next page, continues drum solo.
There's probably like little sketches, stick figures of J.K. Simmons just raising his hand, close up of the eyes.
Yeah, he like fucking sketched out his own storyboards in them, but they're like very haphazardly done. They look like a child did them. He's got like a sun in the background with a smiley face on it. So yeah, Damien Chazelle had fucking Paul Reiser in this and did barely anything with him. You know, we're talking about, we have our 2 main characters that aren't very likable, but Paul Reiser plays Jim Neiman, Miles Teller's dad in this. And God, it is just, anytime I see old Paul Reiser, it's a breath of fresh air, especially in this movie. Like he reoccurringly pops up, but just in general, it was nice to see Paul. Wouldn't you agree?
It was nice to see him. It was not nice to experience the way he was treated. This movie treats him like shit. He's established as just kind of a. We've talked about this before. Paul Reiser comes at you two different ways. He can be the villain, or where he's just kind of a shady guy, like in Aliens, or he can be an adorable guy, like Mad About You. And here he's playing adorable. He's a good dad. He puts up with Andrew's attitude. He's encouraging. He cares for his son. And the movie just gives him nothing. You can tell that Miles Teller is embarrassed. You know, that Paul Reiser is not, I guess, a superstar. All the way to the very end. The movie doesn't give Paul Reiser a win. Because you would think, okay, they're putting Paul Reiser through all this only so that Miles Teller at the end can come to him and be like, you were right, Dad. I'm sorry. The movie ends with a hug. Nope. It's the last shot, the last Paul Reiser shot in the movie is this close up as he looks through it's not even like his full face. You just see it through a closed door, and he's looking in horror at where the movie's headed. You don't see him again after that.
He has like the face of, you know, remembering that he left the stove on, but he's in, you know, Costa Rica. You know, he's like, oh my God. This is terrible.
And in the background, da, 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 da.
Shut the fuck up, son. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I gotta call our neighbor Ralph to tell him to go fucking turn the stove off. So, after a chance encounter with Fletcher, Neiman is hailed to the studio group, and he shows up there basically as a secondary for Tanner is the character's name. He's there to kind of turn his pages and whatnot. And
My favorite character in
JK's
the movie, Carl Tanner.
Tanner?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Oh, I've seen this movie 3 times, Alex. I just remembered. First time, I didn't even notice Tanner. He was just... Second time, I watched it with my friend Drew, which I've mentioned before. We were drunk, and we'd both seen it before. So it was one of those where we were just like half paying attention to the movie, half doing like a running commentary, and we just became fixated on Tanner's green shirt and Tanner's just how he owns the background. Because there's a lot of... He doesn't really get a lot of lines, but he gets to react to a lot of things in the background whenever Andrew's playing. And he has this posture, I don't know if you noticed, but he has this thing where he doesn't really cross his arms. It's more like he sticks his hands under his armpits. You know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about. I didn't see him do that, though.
Oh, dude, he does it through an entire sequence where, which is when Fletcher, J.K. Simmons, is humiliating Miles Teller for the very first time. And so Miles Teller is with the main drums, and Tanner is in the background. And he has that position. He has his hands stuck under his armpits, and he's just kind of like nodding and looking, and he looks like such a dick. He's overacting so much, but I guess I have a fond memory of it because, like I said, I'd been drinking, so to me it was the funniest thing ever. And then when I was watching it last night, I just started laughing because it just all came flooding back to me. It was like, that's Tanner.
That's fair. I mean, we all have connections to movies like that, and that. I mean, I'm glad you're able to get some joy here from Nate Lang.
When a movie gives you so little, you just hold on to whatever you can get.
I imagine his original acting name, Nate Lang, here was Nathan Lang, and there was too much confusion between him and Nathan Lane, and so his agent's like, "Listen, we got to change this," because they originally called Nathan Lane for to audition for the role of Tanner. Where's the fucking book, Neiman? I need to know where it is.
He looks at Giselle. He's like, "Am I supposed to? Do you really? The script says that I'm supposed to stick my hands up my armpits. Is that right?"
You want me to play the drums? I don't think so. So when he's initially picked for studio band, doesn't Fletcher tell him something like be there at 6 a.m.? He gives him some ridiculous instruction.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, 6 a.m. doesn't sound insane. It only becomes insane when you realize that nobody else showed up at 6 a.m. Everybody else was scheduled at 9.
I have not woken up before like 8 a.m. in several years, so 6 a.m. sounds insane to me. I don't know if my body would allow that to happen.
Every morning, I wake up at 5 a.m. To feed the cats. So yeah, to me, 6 a.m. was fine.
So, yeah, Nori wakes me up sometimes to get her morning biscuit before, sometimes 5:30, but that's really me just sleepwalking, unscrewing a jar lid, dropping it on the floor, and then just walking back to bed. Yeah,
there's no way. At 6 in the morning, I'll give you that. At 6 in the morning, I'm not playing. I'm just sitting there, I'm not even turning the pages.
You beat me to it. I was about to say I'm a long ways away from being motivated to do anything substantial at 6 a.m. I can wake up then if you need me to, but I'm not going to be playing drums or turning pages. But that's the whole point. He gets there and he mind fucked him once again, and he really wasn't. The practice didn't begin till 9 a.m. So it starts. You would think this scene would be in the first reel, but this movie flies by because he says, "All right, gang, Whiplash." He walks in, and you would think that's when the title hits the screen, and Miles Teller, J.K. Simmons.
They would do the Good Will Hunting thing where their names, the credits come up as they're playing their instruments.
Yes, exactly. Nate Lang and Nate Lang as Tanner. And we quickly learn more so just how evil and insane Fletcher is. He realizes that someone's out of tune, and he begins chastising the different sections of the band. He goes through the winds and the who does he end? The reeds, and then he goes to the trombones where he ends up finding somebody. Whatever the case
Yeah,
is.
because he says the bones now.
Yeah.
And I giggled.
Yeah, and one of them thinks he's out of tune, so he gets in his face and starts yelling at him, and the guy starts crying, and he yells, he says fuck really loudly, and the kid runs off ashamed of himself, and he's like, he wasn't really out of tune, you were, but he didn't know, and that's just as bad. So homeboy's a psycho.
But Damien Chazelle, see, that's one of those moments where you can feel that Damien Chazelle is in awe of this guy. It's like, wasn't that cool, guys?
Yeah, he like looks around. I imagine like in a table read, every time one of those lines drop, he would look around for like, visual affirmation of himself, like someone just to give him like the proud nod. And
he would just do a boner check. It's like, how many people liked it?
Let's take 5. But that's, painting an insight. There's a difference between, wanting and even demanding perfection and then being an emotional terrorist like Fletcher is here. And Neiman gets put on, and this is what leads to, not my tempo. He asks him, I think it's the double time swing he's wanting him to play here.
Yeah.
No, that's not yet. This is still
it's
Caravan
Whiplash
that they're playing.
Oh, is that Caravan or Whiplash where he gets...
I thought he called him on for Caravan.
That's
like they start with Whiplash, and then he calls him on for let's give Neiman a try. And says it's not his tempo, and then just again belittles him and humiliates him. And I have in quotations here, he tells him, if you're trying to ruin my band, I will fuck you like a pig. That is just so vile. What, like, I don't even know if that's an insult more than a threat, but it is just a reprehensible line of dialogue.
It just says way too much about the J.K. Simmons character. But okay, so this is where the movie detaches itself from reality, though, because even when he kind of fucks with the kid that wasn't out of tune but thought he was out of tune, I have to linger like, man, this guy's a dick. And it's a shame that he can get away with this. But the way that he treats Miles Teller in this sequence, where he throws a fucking chair at him, right? At some point.
Yeah.
Slaps him.
He throws a chair at him and he slaps him in this scene, yeah.
Right. It's just, in what world? If I see this in a movie, the next scene is J.K. Simmons getting fired. Or at the very least, like an investigation being opened.
Not one person took out their cell phone and started, Instagramming what was going on. Instagram was around then. They could have taken their phone out and, taken a video and, check this out, LOL, white boy being owned. So the ebb and flow of his music is intertwined with Nicole, who is played by Melissa Benoist? Benoist.
She's Supergirl. That's if you kept up with superhero casting news, you would know that she's Supergirl.
Benoist, Supergirl, whatever. She's pretty. She's too good for Miles Teller in this movie.
Yes, that is a fact. One thing first, I want to get out of the way. Her introduction is early in the movie because she's at the movies with Paul Reiser, and she works at the movie theater, and she works behind the concession stand, and she commits the cardinal sin of scooping popcorn out of the popper with the tub. She doesn't scoop it into the tub. She uses the tub to scoop the popcorn, which is incredibly unsanitary. You're not supposed to do that.
Breaking protocol, breaking operation.
Already getting on my bad side. So when I saw that she was going on a date with him, I was like, serves her right.
Yeah, they go out, they have an awkward first date about where they go to school and all this. And I mean, she's there, but she doesn't really play too much of a character that's like consequential because his obsession with music begins here. After this, first encounter with Fletcher, like in his nature, in his element here of conducting, he realizes that I guess he has to prove something to him. So his obsession really starts becoming the focus here, despite the fact that he has a really good girl in front of him.
Yeah.
He's too blind to see that.
But the way the movie's constructed, Again, it feels like Damien Chazelle kind of telling you, well, how cool is this guy that he's willing to sacrifice a girl that seems to like him, that seems smart. I mean, up to the point of dating him, I guess. But she's pretty. She's, and yet he has the fortitude of character to turn away that temptation to dedicate himself fully to the pursuit of his dreams. The movie, when you're watching it, is repellent because of the way that he tells her that, the way that he basically tells her that she's gonna be dragging him down. But the way that the movie is constructed, it just makes it feel like, no, but Damien Chazelle wants you to think that he's cool. He's doing something cool. Isn't it cool that he's so determined? He has enough character to not just put up with Fletcher, but to also eventually outsmart him, defeat him, so to speak.
Yeah, it's clearly just, I guess, some regrets from Damien Chazelle that he never tackled the career of music, and he's just trying to vent it through the character here of Andrew Neiman, who begins, his ascension here through the studio band, as we kind of jested about earlier at a competition. He misplaces Tanner's sheet music after a stern warning from Fletcher. If you lose this, you're fucking done. You're out of here. So Tanner goes and tries to throw Neiman under the bus. He's like, Neiman lost my music, and Fletcher rightly tells him the music was your responsibility. And this is where we learn that he can't play due to he needs visual cues. It's a learning disorder that he has. Of course, Fletcher is very understanding of this. Just kidding. He takes a point to mock his learning disorder. Yeah, and basically just belittle him as he does with every other male character in this movie. He does demean a female character at one point early in the movie, where he asks her to play like a note, and it's like, well, let's see if your first chair just because you're cute. And she plays it, goes, yep, that's it. Anyway, this is where Neiman ends up making the core drummer of the group, because he's able to go on stage and play the notes from memory, and knocks Tanner out of the equation.
Here's the reason why I guess Tanner endeared himself to me, because he has nothing to do if there aren't any pages. There's no pages for him to flip.
I never thought about that.
For Neiman. So there's no reason for him to be out there sitting with the rest of the band. But yet Fletcher made him go out and sit himself there and just, I don't know, cross his arms in that weird way again while the rest of the band is playing. It was, I don't know. It's just crazy. I wonder if they were like, well, we're paying this guy for the day, so might as well just have him there. Pull up a chair for Tanner.
Basically dunced him for the world to see. He's like, we're at this competition. We're just going to put you in the dunce chair. Turn around and stare at the wall, but everyone's going to see you.
Back when they thought that they'd gotten Nathan Lane to play the part, they're like, well, let's throw Nathan Lane in there. We're not going to waste him. We already got him.
To reinstill the spirit of punk rock, even though this movie is about jazz, and the spirit of punk rock and the musicians striving for a greater good, we get a family dinner scene with, I would assume this was Andrew's cousins and his uncle and aunt back at the home of his father, Jim. His cousins are football players, and I guess striving in a more traditional, acceptable sense of middle American families. And, he really has none of it, and it just leads to a big family squabble. I mean, I think his uncle asked him, you have any friends? Because it really is, it paints him as such an unlikable prick. It's one of those things of like, he's pretty much right in his argument that what he's achieved so far is a more elite level of performance than, his Division III football player cousins. But he's such a fucking asshole in his argument that it's like, no, you're wrong.
Yeah, it's such a wasted opportunity, because this was the one time where you could have gotten us back on Andrew's side. I mean, he already lost us because he's a dick, because of the way he treated Supergirl. But here, I could see where he was coming from. I could feel his pain. He's the guy on that table, that dinner table. He's the guy that has a podcast. Nobody else understands what the hell his deal is. They can't wrap themselves around drumming. It's not a tangible path to success, I guess. When they ask him about his drumming, it's just out of courtesy, not because they actually know how to process the information he gives them. But then, yeah, he lashes out and he embarrasses Paul Reiser, which is where I just decided he was not worth my time. Poor Paul Reiser is just trying to eat his chicken in peace, and yet he finds himself having to make excuses for his son.
Yeah, it's all just very egotistical, and I think it leads into him breaking up with Nicole. And we've already kind of explained that he thinks he's so self-righteous. Well, he is so self-righteous. He doesn't think he is. He's so self-righteous, and he thinks he's going to be something great that he can't afford to have a girlfriend at the time, and has this unbelievably egotistical diatribe about why he needs to break up with this girl. And it's painful to watch, and you really feel for Nicole, Melissa Benoist, but then you realize, no, she's smart and much better than him. She'll bounce back from this, but this motherfucker's going to want her back someday. And, I mean, that's what turns out to happen.
The problem is that the movie kind of proves him right by what happens at the end, which is really irritating. You know what I mean? Because he basically tells her that the only way that he can be good enough is if he doesn't have any attachments. And then, ultimately, the movie leads you to believe that he became good enough. Therefore, the movie retroactively justifies his decisions up till then. It's okay that he was such an asshole to his father. It's okay that he let this abusive teacher abuse him. And it's okay that he broke up with a girl that seemed really good for him. Because in the end, he achieved what he wanted. And that doesn't sit well with me. I think that the movie morally had the responsibility to actually show that, Andrew made all these sacrifices and either they weren't necessary or he still achieved some, he might have achieved whatever he wanted to achieve, but it didn't give him happiness. And instead, by the time we get to the end of the movie, none of those things happen. So that's a bummer.
Could you tell this movie was written from the perspective of a man, is my question.
Not just a man, but a man that maybe needs to justify his previous failures. Just like, I would have done better, but I had a girlfriend at the time.
A man who definitely wished his drumming career would have gone more places than it did. This next sequence is fucking like a quarter of the movie, where we come into class for the studio group. J.K. Simmons comes in and explains to the class that a former student of his named Sean Casey had died in a car wreck, and that he was a really good musician. And they listen to him for a little bit, and then they start playing double time swing, and this is where he like freaks out and starts alternating the drummers to see who can nail it. It's at this point he brings in Connolly, the another drummer that we were introduced to very briefly in the movie from like the whatever you want to call it, the juvie or the elementary musical act, the first stage of whatever the band is at Schaefer. And he's brought in, and it's just basically this revolving door of the three of these guys, because this is like the faster, and he wants them to play double time swing correctly, and this ends up being like a 5-hour session. They're not able to begin practice till 2 in the morning because he's putting these guys through the fucking ringer.
But it doesn't make any sense. I mean, Alex, am I just tone deaf? What they're doing in this whole sequence is just hitting the drums as quickly as possible, but there's no rhythm. There's nothing to it. Am I wrong? To me, it was just J.K. Simmons yelling at them to go faster, but there was no magic. There was no music coming out of it.
Wasn't his tempo, man.
What the fuck is his tempo?
Could have used Richie Ramone here, the fastest drummer the Ramones ever had.
With speed.
But it could have really brought up the pace for him.
Speed doesn't really equal quality, I think. And also, I mean, I'll level with you. I became increasingly distracted during the drumming sequences once it got into my head that the close-ups of Andrew Newman drumming could be read as Andrew Newman jerking off. Once you get that in your head, it's just fuck, dude. Just the more frenetic, the more sweaty, the more bloody he gets. It's just funny. You can't take it seriously anymore.
I was gonna say I hope you're not accustomed to people bleeding when they jerk off, but I don't know. Things might be different in Peru.
Much like with drumming, I think if your hands start bleeding, you're doing it wrong.
This scene is definitely highlighted by a lot of offensive J.K. Simmons dialogue again. Racial epithets and cultural derogatory slurs, and some pretty offensive slurs for homosexuals used in this. It's all pretty intense.
He made me laugh once, which is when at one point, probably in like hour 3 of this torture, Connolly adjusts the height on the seat.
Oh, the seat. That's it, huh? That's why you've been playing wrong. I can't remember his exact verbiage, but he says something like, well, you better be fucking right now. And, of course, it all leads to Neiman finally getting on the rhythm that he wants, and they're able to begin practice at 2 a.m. This is what leads into their next competition. Neiman's taking the bus there. My note just says absolute disaster. He's taking the bus. The bus dies down. He catches another bus, and then he gets to a bus station. He was expecting a cab to be there. There's no cabs. He goes and rents a car. He leaves his drumsticks at the rental place. He makes it to the performance just in time to get in a married couple squabble with J.K. Simmons. Realizes he doesn't have his sticks, goes back to the rental place, gets them, and then is like speeding to get back, and then gets fucking T-boned by a truck. It's all so much, and it's filmed so chaotically. I mean, this is like a scene that could give someone motion sickness, like we, back in the day when 3D movies first started, like as a full-time thing, and have to clean puke out of theaters and shit. I could see, some seniors watching this and it just being too much. And, when he gets hit by the car, just
Have you ever been T-boned, Alex?
No, I'm very fortunate in that, knock on wood too. I haven't really been in a bad car wreck. I think I've just been rear-ended somebody, but I've never been T-boned. Have you?
Yeah, once. I understand not all T-bones are the same, but of course my first instinct when I see Neiman like get T-boned is that's bullshit. That's not how it goes, and not so much in the sense that
his bone wasn't even hanging out like Anton Chigurh at the end of No Country for Old Men.
Right. But I guess it comes more from the fact that I got T-boned, right? And my car didn't flip like his. I was not bleeding after it. It was just, I got hit and the car spun. And then I was just like on the side of the sidewalk or of the street. And I kind of like gathered myself. And once I realized I was okay, my next thought was like, man, I really hope that the person that hit me is okay. I got out of my car, and because I got T-boned, on the passenger side, not, on the driver's side. So I was able to just open my car and walked out, and I was kind of wobbly. And I saw the lady that had hit me, like, come out of her car, and we're like, are you okay? Are you okay? And then all I could do was get in my car and drive home. Like, my car was like totaled, but I could still make it home. And that was the last time that my car was driven. that car. But anyway, when I see fucking Miles Teller crawl out of the wreckage bleeding, and then it's not even that, he thinks that he can drum. It's just that he even makes it to the to the show after this. I said, no, after my T-bone was a lot less dramatic, and there was no way I could have done anything. It was like I said, I barely managed to drive myself home and then just spend the rest of the day soothing myself. This fucker.
But no, he's going to go and, shred it up on the drums. He's Buddy Rich, motherfucker.
And then he jumps on Fletcher. It's like, where's this energy coming from?
Yeah. I thought, like the throwing up thing, like it looked like he was about to puke and he couldn't even keep his shit together. And then I guess he got one last shot of adrenaline when Fletcher was like, get the fuck off my stage. Because then he runs and fucking spears him. Apparently he broke cracked two of J.K. Simmons' ribs with that spear that he hit him with.
Oh,
and
man.
It was in the last 2 days of shooting, so Simmons, according to IMDb, managed to continue work despite the injury.
Yeah, that the really hard work of waving his hands in front of the band.
I was about to say, I hope that like the only like the last day, there's 2 days left in shooting or whatever, that happened, and then like the last scene they had to record was him hitting Miles Teller in the face, and he put a roll of quarters in his hand before he hit him. Come on, motherfucker. So this is it. Teller, Neiman, he blows it. I mean, understandably so. You can't. His bus broke down and they got hit by a car. He still showed a warrior spirit, but it was bravery and stupidity a lot of times border each other very closely. And that's it for him. Instead of going to the hospital and handling it like a man, he instead tackles this middle-aged man and tries to fight him for many to see. And he's done. He's kicked out of Schaefer, and that is, for all intents and purposes, the end of his drumming career. I do have the note here, fucking Bourne camera. That's a note I had.
Oh, yeah.
That's more real talk.
Well, it's really weird, too, because honestly, the first time I watched this movie, I thought that this entire thing was like a dream sequence. I don't remember when my T-bone happened, so I don't know if that was influencing my thoughts. But to me, I thought that after he got hit, we were just, he was passed out. He was in a coma somewhere, and everything else was just his imagination. And then slowly, at some point, I realized that, oh no, this is still happening. The movie just went completely outlandish because there's this weird sort of montage that shows him talking to, I don't know, is it a social worker or just a private investigator, somebody that Paul Reiser has hired? Somebody is questioning him about Fletcher.
Yeah, that all comes into the next scene. But I never thought of that. That's a good call out because the camera is like noticeably like bobbing and weaving when it's showing Fletcher. Like it's like a Bourne camera that's tired. And I guess that could be we're supposed to be seeing a first person view of what Neiman sees. But no, yeah, and then like because the audio dips too. And what you're referring to is the next sequence where a lawyer representing the parents of Sean Casey reveals that he actually hung himself, and he had dealt with depression and anxiety that was spurred on after he had dealt with Fletcher as a teacher. And basically she explains, we just want to make sure he can't do this to anyone ever again. And like an abusive relationship, Neiman here is like, no, he didn't do anything. He was fine. And Paul Reiser being the voice of reason, like, what the fuck is wrong with you, kid? It's like, why are you protecting him? But it all does lead to eventually Neiman acquiesces and says, yeah, I'll testify as an anonymous source about,
But he doesn't even do it in that honorable way. He's just more like, fine, just tell me what I need to say. He's acting like, okay, well, reluctantly, I will do you a favor and get this guy fired.
The perils of being young. And this is where Neiman tries to kind of restart his life as a young man. And his dad ends up helping him find an apartment in the city. It's actually a pretty good looking apartment. It's one I wouldn't mind having if I ever had to go back to that type of living. But
with all the gushers?
Yeah. That's like one of my notes that Paul Reiser just saying, I stocked the pantry full of gushers. I know you love them, which who the fuck doesn't?
Such a good dad.
So in the city, a chance meeting brings Fletcher and Neiman back together again.
What are the fucking odds?
Yeah, for real. He walks by a club that says that Terrence Fletcher's performing later in the evening, so he sees him. Fletcher ends up seeing Neiman. He talks to him. He explains, I've been let go of my position, and he has this big monologue about how he demanded more because he wanted to have a peer a student, a pupil is the word I was looking for there, that was capable of more. And he has this big monologue that kind of concludes or climaxes, I should say, with him saying the two most dangerous words in the English language are good job, which is a very interesting stance to have.
Yeah, it's this is where the movie gets really dangerous up. And I think it's just because it's a calibration thing. I think that Damien Chazelle all kidding aside about how cool he may think that Fletcher is, and I think he does think he's cool, but I think worse than that is just that he doesn't realize the power of the words that he's putting on Simmonson's mouth, and when coupled with his performance, and just the fact that, for better or for worse, J.K. Simmons is a charismatic guy, and Chazelle gives him 2 scenes in the movie where he gets to sell you Fletcher as a human. One is when he tells the students about Sean Casey, and he seems really shaken by the fact that Sean Casey has died. I'm pretty sure he cries. He lets like maybe a single tear drop. And watching that, you're like, wow, this guy, it really is just an act that he's putting on for the students, but really underneath he's human. And then you get this other scene where he is given the chance to rationalize his behavior and sound reasonable, right? In this scene, the acting of Simmons, coupled with the dialogue, coupled with the reaction, the scripted reaction from Miles Teller to everything he's saying, it's all designed to tell you like, hey, this guy kind of has a point.
Yeah.
And so what ends up happening is this movie is like the ultimate paradox, because I think that it ends up, one, encouraging toxic behavior like Fletcher's, right? Because it's telling you that this guy, he may be abrasive, he may be a little too much, but in the end he has good intentions. And worst of all, by the end of the movie, it's like, oh, he gets results. But then at the same time, it also kind of excuses mediocrity, because it's giving people an excuse to give up as well. Because anybody that pushes them even a little bit, now they have somebody like Fletcher to point at and say, oh, you're just like that asshole in Whiplash. So I'm not even going to try. You're just abusing me, and it's not warranted. So it's in the end, the movie ends up cutting both ways, and both ways are bad because of just the way that they wrote that character. I think that everybody would have been better off if Fletcher was actually written a little more like a villain, which is what he is.
Yeah, and here it just exactly what you said is correct, Julio. He should be written more like a villain, like fucking Kingpin or something, or Thanos. Just have really intense, over like domineering dialogue. But instead, he speaks kind of like this longing lover, or a long lost, friend with a deep connection, which I guess is the story they're trying to tell, but it's really not there. It should be, the dialogue that's written, specifically in this scene, is way more akin to Before Sunset or something like that. And especially with the way they part, where he gives them like I've got a band together, I need a drummer, the one I have isn't working, he's not like you,
I miss
and
you.
then Miles Teller looks off into the distance with the cars going by, and it's like, well, I'll think about it, I don't know. And we all know what you're going to do.
He walks away, but halfway through, he looks back.
Yeah, exactly. And fucking Kiss Me by Six Cents None the Richer starts playing, or Sixpence None the Richer, whatever the fuck. So even though he plays coy with Fletcher, he's obviously over the moon that he has this gig lined up. And this asshole has the gumption to call Nicole and be like, hey, you want to come hang out? And God knows how much time has passed by this point, but he thinks she's just going to be like, yep, I'll be right there. And
I knew you'd come to your senses.
Exactly. And fortunately, he gets like a moment of comeuppance here, because she kind of owns him and is like, yeah, I don't know, I'll have to ask my boyfriend. And then he has this moment of like, what? She didn't wait for me? What is this? So yeah, the well bears no water for Miles Teller here. But he's very happy and very energetic and enthusiastic about this opportunity that he has.
Somehow he cons Paul Reiser into going, though, which I was kind of irritated that the movie didn't give us that scene, because Paul Reiser has been very much against Fletcher, right? He, like you said, he encouraged Andrew to talk to the lawyer to get this guy fired, because this guy had been abusing his son. And yet somehow, Paul Reiser is cool with this happening. I understand that Andrew is, I guess, sort of an adult and he can do whatever he wants. But why is Paul Reiser in the audience?
Supporting his son, man. They only have each other, so they gotta see it through.
He's too good for him.
But Paul Reiser's in attendance. It is the JVC Jazz Festival. It's a big opportunity. It's a big annual event, and impressing the right person there can really springboard your star power, your name, your career, any extreme analogy or phrase you want to use, any cliche, it can carry you there. As they get up on stage, Andrew's very excited to be there, very eager, and I guess he thinks this is his second chance, a second lease on life, so to speak, and he's got this shit-eating grin on his face like he's about to conquer the world. When Fletcher walks up on stage and asks him, "You think I'm fucking stupid? I know it was you." And he reveals that he knows it was Neiman that got him fired. So he's basically here to ensure that he crushes any hopes, admirations, and dreams that Neiman ever has, any ideas he has about ever being a full-time jazz musician, as he announces the song they're going to play is Upswingin', which is also, immediately Neiman has like PTSD regarding this. So it's an actual living nightmare.
Right. It's but this is where Fletcher becomes a supervillain. Right. Up till now,
yes.
I just don't understand. Why would you waste our time trying to humanize him when he's going to become fucking Lex Luthor in the final scene of the movie?
No shit.
It doesn't make any sense because, everybody there knows that Fletcher is in charge. He's it reflects on him. He spent the entire movie talking about how the band's performance reflects on him. And now he's in front of these people who are super important. He's told everybody that these people decide if you succeed or not, and they never forget. So his plan is to make Andrew, to put Andrew in a position where he's going to play terribly, and that ends his future in music. Okay, but that also makes Fletcher himself look bad in front of these people. So is he self-immolating just for the sake of getting revenge of Andrew? He doesn't even have a backup plan, because when Andrew takes off, there's not a second drummer that's going to replace him.
He's just like throwing the rest of this band under the bus. It's just like a kamikaze mission.
Yeah. Andrew, I'm gonna get you.
He does all he can to ensure that he just tanks this, and everyone else on stage is like, well, what do we do now? And he's like completely hate boning him with his conducting, like the way he's looking at him while he's conducting the rest of the band. He's like, yeah, you see this? It's like basically like he's having sex with his girlfriend right in front of him. He's just like, what are you gonna do about it? Nothing. And so Andrew collects his shit and he walks off stage, an utter defeated man. And the only constant in this movie of support for him, Paul Reiser's there waiting for him, and they have a good embrace. And I guess this is the moment, though, where Neiman realizes, no, I'm not letting this fucker win, which whatever that means, because he needs him to succeed. But goes back to his drum kit.
He's like, real men don't hug their parents.
You can hug it out, bitch. And he goes back and he just kicks into Caravan really aggressively. And he ends up cueing the band himself, which is crazy. And you can see just the look of defeat on Fletcher's eyes, where
everybody has plays to go along.
Back yeah. And he goes back to basically miming the cues and, trying to get everyone back in. And then Andrew just won't stop. He just goes on this insane drum solo that is like this huge dramatic conclusion to the movie. And eventually to the point where I guess him and Fletcher get back on the same page, even after, this extreme mental anguish and torment. They're together once again, and it ends them building to a massive crescendo, and they cue the band finale together. It's absolutely preposterous.
It's ridiculous. It's just the close-ups. I mean, this movie is just built on close-ups, really. And here it just, Chazelle goes out of control. There's this shot, and I was very happy to see that it's actually a GIF on Twitter of just J.K. Simmons's eyes as he's coming,
yes.
as they're approaching the climax of this performance. It's just insane. The way that he conducts Andrew. Again, I know it's my fault for just getting into my head that it looks like they're jerking off, but it's just, because he slows him down, slows down the drumming until it's almost completely non-existent, and then he rises it back up, picks up the tempo, and it just, I don't know, it just looks silly. I couldn't take it seriously, and it looks even sillier because they are taking it so seriously. I couldn't connect. I was more like Paul Reiser. I was just watching in horror, going like, what the fuck is going on?
And then the movie's over. I guess we learned something.
I mean, they didn't even play Whiplash at the end. What the fuck? I honestly thought that it was going to be a medley. I thought that Andrew was gonna go from Caravan to Whiplash to whatever it is that they close with, but it didn't happen. He went rogue.
It did not. It just kind of came and went, and it was over. And that was Whiplash. And J.K. Simmons said, "Whiplash."
No, Tanner did. He was still sitting behind everybody.
He jumped up at the end of the song and just threw his arms out to the side. Whiplash!
The post-credit scene is Paul Reiser walking out of the auditorium, and he runs into Melissa Benoit and her boyfriend. They're like, "Are we late? They already played."
And then he just looks at the camera and gives it like a shrug and a Jim Halpert look. Anyway, that was Whiplash.
That was Whiplash. 94%. Go figure.
An awards darling that won 3 Academy Awards. I will give you until Real Talk, Julio, to figure out what those 3 awards were.
Well, I really hope that it was Best Earworm, because it's been stuck in my head. All right. Well, let's go to Real Talk.
Hey, sorry I'm late.
Well, glad you could fit us into your busy schedule, darling.
I know. Look, I'm sorry I'm late, but I'm here. I'm ready to go.
Connolly's playing the part.
Yeah, like fucking hell he's playing my part.
What the fuck did you just say to me?
It's my part.
It's my part, and I decide who to lend it to. Usually it's somebody that has fucking sticks.
I left him in the car. I'll be right back. Take me 5 minutes.
I'm warming up the band now.
Look, I can use Ryan's sticks. It's
Neiman, you lost the fucking part.
No, I didn't. Look, you can't fucking do this to me.
Can't?
Yeah.
When did you become a fucking expert on what I can or cannot do, you fucking weepy willow shit sack?
I earned that part.
You never earned anything. God, you are a self-righteous prick. The only reason you're a fucking core is because you misplaced a folder. The only reason you're in studio band to begin with is because I told you exactly what I'd be asking for in Nassau. Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, I'm in studio band because I'm the
Hey, why
best
don't
player.
you just back
Yo,
off, bro?
fuck off, Johnny Utah. Turn my pages, bitch.
Hey, I can cut you any fucking time I want.
You would have cut me by now.
Try me, you fucking weasel.
All right, I am recording for Real Talk. But before Real Talk, let's talk about what patrons can expect when this episode is released, or shortly after it's released. Alex, what are you plugging on the Patreon exclusive segment this time?
I always feel like plugging like the whole idea of it. I know we like used to do it, just say whatever's going on. But now with Patreon, I feel like it should be something like new and something that I just recently did, and that's not really how things work with me. So I am going to be discussing the Jackass film franchise briefly, and just it's something that me and my sister have been revisiting recently, and just kind of realization of why those are like comfort movies for me, and how I understand that sounds kind of disturbing off the get-go, but I'll be discussing those movies, and because there's a new one coming out, so I've been revisiting those, and kind of sparked a lot of old emotions for me and whatnot. So be talking about Jackass, and Julio will probably just be like, yeah, I don't really care about this. So
Dude, I watched Jackass 3D. I screened it. I was excited too.
Still one of the better 3D movies because it was actually shot with 3-dimensional cameras.
Yeah, I've forgotten that there's a new one coming out. Man, somebody's gonna die.
I didn't realize Steve was almost
shit.
50.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but you might have to deal with a lot of CGI on this latest installment. On my end, we'll be talking about 2 things. I think my mission with these segments now, I think, is going to be to champion at least one thing that is not a sequel or part of a franchise, or you know what I mean? Because I feel like
A standalone.
during there are constant discussions throughout the run of this show. I'm always telling you about how there's like all this cool stuff out there that's not like a Marvel movie, that is not a superhero movie, or that is not a sequel or a remake or whatever. But I don't think that I actually bring them up enough, like with concrete examples. There's this really, really good movie that I finally watched. It came out earlier this year. It opened on streaming. It was like right around the time the shutdown started happening all over America. The movie's called Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. It's an independent movie. It's directed by Eliza Hittman, and it's really good. It's on HBO Max now. That's how I finally got around to watching it. But I'm gonna be talking about it. It's basically about a girl that. A teenage girl gets pregnant. She basically goes on a trip to New York to get an abortion. Doesn't that sound just riveting, Alex?
Sounds like a lark, a family romp.
It's kind of a dark version of Juno. It's so good. I can't wait to tell you about it and hopefully convince you to give it a shot. And then because I can't help myself, I'm also going to talk a little bit about Cobra Kai. Which I started watching. I blew through the first season on Netflix, and I'm ready for the second one. I don't know what your relationship is with the Karate Kid, Alex. So
Minimal.
I don't know how minimal, but you've seen it,
Yes, the first one, yeah.
right? In the original, not the Will Smith remake. Well, not Will Smith, like his son, Jaden. I think it's Jaden.
That is correct. Yeah, I remember that. That one did like pretty good box office, but no, I've never seen it. Just the original.
Okay, good. Well, I'll refresh your memory, maybe convince you to give this one a shot, even though it kind of represents things that you hate because it's just basically nostalgia. But it's good, and it's 30-minute episodes, so it's even better. And also, if you're a patron, then by now you've already seen the Patreon exclusive episode that we did about Blue is the Warmest Color, which should have dropped either Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. And then also a special Christmas surprise, a little blast from the past that we pulled from the archives. So enjoy that. And then, of course, as usual, if you're a patron, you also get a peek at a bunch of audio clips that didn't make it into the episode. So a lot of fun. If that sounds appealing, you want to join the Patreon family, patreon.com/Contrarian Prime. That's where you find us. Also, Alex, we have a new patron, and it's a name that's not just familiar to us, but familiar to anybody that listens to the show. Chaz Fisher has joined the ranks of our patrons. And I was just thinking, it's been a while. It's been almost a year since we had Chaz on the show. We had him for our Terminator 2-parter spectacular.
That wasn't even a year ago. Good Lord.
That was January, so we're almost there.
My God.
Welcome, Chaz. Very happy
Hey,
to
buddy.
have you as a patron, and I'm sure we'll hear from you soon. And now let's go to Real Talk.
Julio, I don't know if you did actually looked it up. So that would be cheating. But off the top of your head, do you know what the 3 Academy Awards that Whiplash won were?
I didn't look it up. In fact, I forgot about it. I went to grab a cider, and I kind of exchanged words with my wife, and then it was just out of my mind. Well, I mean, I know Simmons got Best Supporting Actor.
Yes, sir.
I am assuming it might have gotten... No, well, never mind, because they're covering... It's not original, so it's not Best Original Score. Maybe Cinematography. I'm going to go with Best Cinematography, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Sound Design, maybe.
You're pretty close on those other two. It was Best Supporting Actor, Best Film Editing, and Best Sound Mixing. So you were definitely on the right path.
I picked the wrong sound category. Damn it. Hats off to sound engineers and all that stuff. But I guess my frustration when referring to that category is that I can never keep them straight. Like, you get the Oscar for Best Sound Mixing and the Oscar to Best Sound Editing. I was like, which is which? And I know there was one time where the Oscars actually gave you like a peek at which one is which. And I was like, wow, can we do this every time? Because there's no way I'm going to remember. And of course they didn't ever again. But that makes sense. And the editing, that also makes sense. Yeah. Oh, well. 1 out of 3. I've done worse.
It was a valiant effort. Like you said, you were on the right path. So it was also nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Picture, losing out that year to Julio's favorite, Birdman. And for Best
Much better drumming in Birdman.
and Best Adapted Screenplay, losing out to The Imitation Game, which I have not seen. Have you seen the short film that this is based on, the Whiplash short film?
No. As I was pulling quotes earlier, I realized that I should actually give it a shot. Like, and try to find it just the way that I found the Greener Grass short film. It's like, that's the beauty of the internet. Nothing ever dies. Nothing stays hidden. Have you seen it?
No, I was just reading about it now. It's J.K. Simmons is in it, and then Johnny Simmons plays Neiman, and Johnny Simmons
No relation
was,
to J.K.
no.
Simmons?
No, not to my knowledge. He was young Neil in Scott Pilgrim. That's the only thing I really recognize him from. Trying to see if he's been anything else.
I know who he is. I mean, that's all you had to say, really.
Young Neil?
Yeah. That's gotta suck.
That he didn't get the big one?
Yeah. It's like you get, like, Simmons gets to make the jump into feature film, but you don't. What does that say? I guess the best possible spin is like, hey, it's not you, it's just that the studio wants Miles Teller because he already established that he's an asshole.
Because he was so good that he was able to play himself in his third movie that he made. I guess before we get into why this was requested, let's go ahead and see what the 6%. There was those 6% of critics, 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. That means there were still a few naysayers, as it were. Julio, what were they saying?
Yeah, I grabbed 5 quotes this time, which is a little more than what I usually do, but they were pretty amusing. So 5 rotten quotes from the Rotten Tomatoes website, starting with Debbie Baldwin from Ladue News, who says, the advertising boasts words like riveting and astounding. Sadly, I was neither riveted nor astounded. What a Debbie Downer. That's the only reason why I pulled that quote. Next, Candice Frederick from Real Talk Online says, the film has potential, but ultimately there's more bark than bite. Do you agree with that, Alex? More bark than bite? Do you think it's a lot of yelling, but not enough car crashes? not enough slapping?
I think there's a lot of bark, but yeah, I think this movie has plenty of bite, like a Barks root beer.
So there's just as much bark as in BARQ.
Yes, exactly.
Jules Brenner from Cinema Signals says, a more distasteful rendering of character and story I can't begin to imagine. I must be missing something. I'll say, Jules, you're not alone. We'll get into it, but I mean, that is one of the divide when it comes to the appreciation of this film. It is pretty well marked, I think. It's very notorious. I mean, I don't know about you, but in my experience, there's 2 things that I'm familiar with, and it's like the strong opinions from people that love this movie and people that hate this movie, and also the strong opinions on how people read the ending of this movie, which I think kind of it could feed into how you whether you like it or not too. So I look forward to discussing that with you. Then John Bifus from Commercial Appeal, Memphis, Tennessee, says, the movie struck me as unreal and vaguely ridiculous. I found it easy to imagine Will Ferrell in the role of Fletcher, a switch that would require no decrease in tantrums and no change in dialogue. And my God, Will Ferrell playing Fletcher would have been amazing.
Yeah, I don't think he accomplished what he thought he was going to with that statement.
I don't know that you could still have Miles Teller there, but maybe the Will Ferrell version is the one where Johnny Simmons fits better. You can see Will Ferrell slapping young Neil, and you're like, I can roll with this. And then finally, David Thompson from The New Republic says, this is a student film in rampant overdrive, and it will attract attention and offers. So I just hope Mr. Chazelle doesn't believe too much in his film's dumb message. And therein lies the question, what is Whiplash's message? And is it dumb? I don't know. I was going to, and I forgot, I didn't get around to it. I was going to try to find a Schwarzenegger quote because he had things to say. I don't know if you came across that on your research, just his reaction to Whiplash. But that was always something that kind of, I don't know, amused me. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No. What are you talking about?
Well, I can't find it on my phone. The internet has failed me. Unfortunately, now I guess the algorithm decided that I'm looking for articles about Terminator Dark Fate because Schwarzenegger and J.K. Simmons are in it.
Thoughts and prayers.
Yes. Well, I'll bring it up in a minute, but if you want to go through, I guess, whatever you have as an opening salvo.
Well, I was going to throw it back to you to see, I guess, Katie and OT, have they given any, grounds to why they don't like this movie, what they don't like about it, or we just know that they don't like it? They
made it clear, at least Katie made it clear, that they just find the characters just unbearable. I mean, I can totally see that as in like, oh, well, you dislike these people so much that you can't stand a movie centered around them. So when I think of the reaction to Whiplash, I always think of the ending as something that people read one way or the other. And I don't know that you can make the argument that it's open to interpretation. I'm very curious to see how you feel about this. Because to me, I feel like it's very clear. But maybe it isn't. Maybe it is open and I'm just being kind of pig-headed with my reading of the movie.
So Whiplash premiered at Sundance on January 16th of 2014. And it went into a wider release in October of that year, October 10th of 2014. As we mentioned, nominated for Best Picture, won Best Supporting Actor J.K. Simmons, nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay, and then won for Best Film Editing and Best Sound Mixing. $3.3 million with a box office return of $49 million, making it one of the lowest grossing films to ever be nominated for Best Picture, which is interesting. Was shot in 19 days, which given what appeared to be the emotional and physical toll that some of these scenes would have taken on their actors, it's pretty impressive. A visual double was used.
Oh, so that's not really J.K. Simmons conducting.
That was not really his penis. No, because I remember when the movie came out, reading about it, because I know Miles Teller did a lot of the drumming, and what it says here is, although a visual double was used, all of Andrew's drumming was performed by Miles Teller himself to pre-recorded tracks. About 40% of Teller's drumming was used in the soundtrack. Okay, that doesn't really make much sense. That's like a Sex Panther statistic right there. 60% of it was used all of the time.
The body double was just for the slapping. That's not his real face.
I mean, some of that shit was like true Buddy Rich shit. And so I remember reading at the time that like he did a lot of the drumming, but some of those close-ups of like the hands and shit, that I think that's not him. I couldn't find a more detailed breakdown of that exactly, but whatever the case, man, props to him. Because I know he did a lot of that. And it says he started playing drums when he was in his teens. And as someone who's fucked around with drum kits before, there is a skill set that goes along with that I do not possess, that I am very envious of. And I have an appreciation for people that do have that. So good on him. Written and directed, as we mentioned, by Damien Chazelle, based somewhat on his early life experiences in his jazz band. Man, this movie flew by. It's an hour and 40 minutes. I watched it with my sister today, and I was kind of taking notes and wrapping Christmas gifts while we were watching it. And then, like, I saw them setting up for the finish. I watch way too much pro wrestling. That's the way I just verbalized that. I saw where the movie was, and I turned to my sister. I was like, "Holy fuck, is this the ending already?" She's like, "Yeah." Because they're about to go into the caravan, and that's a compliment that you can give a movie, man, when you're just kind of lost in it and it just completely flies by. Yeah, I'm a big fan of this movie. I guess I haven't really heard arguments against it, so I don't really know what to base my appreciation and admiration for it off of. I don't know like where my lily pads that I'm supposed to springboard off of are set, where the goalposts are, but I really enjoy this. I like Miles Teller a lot. As I mentioned with speaking about Spectacular Now, he has a certain quality that's very relatable to him, and that could be like a white guy thing. I honestly don't know. J.K. Simmons is a phenomenal actor.
That's definitely a white guy thing.
J.K. Simmons or Miles Teller?
J.K. Simmons.
Jonah Jameson. I mean, we've talked about him a lot. He's come up several times on here before, and I think if I remember correctly, it's been years, but I think the unanimous verdict between you, myself, and Reed with Juno was that he was like the best part of it, besides scary Jason Bateman. Yeah, he's just phenomenal. And although, like, obviously you're supposed to find his character kind of reprehensible to a certain extent, he's fucking hilarious in this. His delivery and, like, that scene where he sees that little girl in the hallway, and I guess it's a friend of his, and he's like, "Oh, last time I saw you, you were this small, and when you grow up, will you play in my band?" She's like, "Sure." And then he walks in, he's like, "Listen up, fuckers," and like yells at him and uses a bunch of, as we've mentioned throughout, slurs and epithets that are not appropriate for us to repeat, but there's a lot of comedy in his delivery. It's a very simple movie. I'm curious, what are these readings about the ending that people seem to be hung up on or have
That's
quarrels?
Fascinating that you really don't know. But I guess, I mean, I do think I spend more time online than you do.
I think we spend an equal amount of time online. We just spend them different places.
So
I guess, let me say, yeah, I think he's just a kid that has this insatiable desire to please this guy, his teacher, Fletcher, and Fletcher's this old man who like never achieved what he wanted, never got what he wanted, and he finally got it out of this kid. My take is that Neiman, after the end of the movie, went on to bigger and better things, and that for Fletcher, that was like his crowning achievement. So, I don't know. Does the internet proffer something that they were like lovers that I'm missing out on?
Well, no. What really the big theory is that Paul Reiser is not really his father. That Fletcher is his father. No, I'm kidding.
Okay. Oh God. People make up stupid shit and like believe stupid shit. So like I was believing you there for a second. You could have kept me going.
I was gonna say that's how he knew so much about his past. No. Well, I'll preface this by saying that I agree with what you've said so far. I mean, I think that that's what the story is. I think that where it gets divisive is when you get to the end and people can't agree on what the movie is saying. So let's start there. Do you see the ending as confirmation or, I guess, affirmation of Fletcher's methods? When you get to the end, is the movie telling you, well, it was worth it, right? Like, is the final sequence, the final shots, are they proving Fletcher right? I'm basically saying, okay, well, we watched the back and forth and we'll listen to the different arguments, but in the end, it was worth it because look, Andrew, he never would have done this if it wasn't for Fletcher, right? So Fletcher was right. Or is the movie saying, isn't it a shame that Andrew's so lost in his desire to please this asshole and to be the best, that he doesn't realize how he's being dehumanized by him, and that even when he achieves, when he accomplishes this amazing performance, in the end he's still a kid looking for approval from this asshole and turning his back on somebody who actually cares about him, like Paul Reiser. It's kind of like one way or the other. But when the movie is over, are you watching like a triumph or are you watching a tragedy? How do you read it?
Well, my sister and I were having this discussion about the movie. I might have a little bit of a harder edge to that stuff. I mean, I'm a sensitive guy, and I've, not to say I've ever experienced something like Fletcher, but I've definitely been subject of tough love from time to time, and I'm someone that thinks to a certain extent bullying works. So I'm more in line to think that sometimes hard edges can make things and people prevail. It's also that's also a byproduct of me being a fan of professional fighting for pretty much my whole life and seeing how different coaching methods work for different people. The idea of this Fletcher school of thought and the way that's not how you conduct business with every single person. And I think that is more in line with where I would be like, this movie's unrealistic because he treats every single person exactly the same. And that's not conducive. That's how in this movie you get examples like Sean Casey. That's not going to work for everybody. There's a famous MMA coach named Greg Jackson who has trained just an absolute who's who of professional MMA fighters. And something I've always noticed about him is in his corner in between fights, he approaches every single fighter differently. Sometimes he'll be like, hey, great work. Take a breath. This is what we need to do. Just relax. And then kind of gives them a little bit of technical instruction. Then I've seen him fall like slapping people in the face and being like, this is fucking war, and like yelling at him and like trying to give him like a battle cry, a rallying cry. So I think that people that write off that the style that Fletcher approaches with Neiman has no fruit to it, because that is incorrect. Like I said, to me, the unrealistic part of the movie is that's how he approaches everybody, because that's not going to work. I think that's kind of what the story tries to tell. They kind of try to like show that he approaches everyone like they're a lump of coal that he's trying to just force a diamond out of, I should say. Just like squeeze it until it just cracks and a beautiful 16-karat diamond comes out of it. Which that's not setting realistic expectations for yourself. But at the same time, I can already see what I'm saying right now would offend some people, or some people would find the idea of it to be incorrect. But I don't think so. I think there's examples of where it works and where it doesn't. Marv Marinovich, who I named in the first half, and I think I even name dropped him recently on another podcast. I don't know if anyone that listens to our podcast knows who Marv Marinovich is or who his son is, and the story there.
It took me a moment to figure out who you were talking about in the first half. The first name, DuPont, is the one that did it. I was like, how do I know that? And then it clicked.
He tried this shit with his son, and it didn't work. And his son just turned out and wasn't, he's had drug problems and problems with the law and whatnot. That doesn't work for everybody, but it does for others. Marv Marinovich also trained BJ Penn for a few camps when BJ was the most successful he was in his entire career, when he had someone who actually could discipline him and put these strenuous restrictions on him for how to train and what you can do. And, BJ was a ball of natural talent that always struggled with dedication, and that worked for him. I'm making all these analogies to things that aren't music, obviously, but that's also... Blue is the warmest color is another example of something we talked about recently on Patreon. But just to kind of quickly recap, the circumstances and the treatment that the two leads in that movie were given, Leah Seydoux and Adele Exarchopoulos, were probably not things that people would say were right. But both of them have since said that, the hardened nature of their leader, in that case the director, I guess the Fletcher for them in this situation, brought something out of them and got performances out of them that probably wouldn't have otherwise, and that they're grateful for that since that happened. This isn't how everything should be, but things like this have a place. And this is kind of like a thing of, I have kind of a hard time sometimes understanding how people don't see that. You're not going to get the best out of people by giving them participation trophies. Not everyone, at least. Yeah, so you telling me that is kind of like, I have a hard time understanding how some people don't see that you'll get, if someone wants to really dedicate their life to something and wants to throw their whole being into something and say, this is what I want to do, make me do it. I think the better argument would be he was 19 in this movie, and that's a bit young to decide something like that. But if you really want to dedicate yourself to something and you think this person is going to lead you down the primrose path and take you to the promised land, I mean, sometimes there's some extreme measures that need to be taken. I don't know. I don't know how you feel about it, Julio, but obviously this is a fictional movie, but in this particular situation, I thought it was, like anybody, it was ridiculous that he was willing to almost die to prove himself to this guy, but he had a goal and he wanted to obtain it, and he thought this guy could lead him to it. And in the end, the way I read the end of the movie was, I'm using my hands right now to make an example so everyone listening to our podcast can see. Fletcher stayed here, and then Neiman ended up surpassing him, but it was because of that help for him to get him there.
Well, I'll start by saying that if I'm remembering correctly, I might have gotten the wrong celebrity, but I'm pretty sure it was Schwarzenegger. Schwarzenegger agrees with you. He thought the movie was ultimately a celebration of what you can achieve when you set your mind to it. Again, I couldn't find the exact quote online, and it could be that I'm misconstruing what he said, but I remember the gist of it was like, hey, this is how Arnold reads the movie, which I found fascinating.
Do you know who the highest paid actor in the world is right now?
Not J.K. Simmons. Clooney?
No, I'm just trying to make the argument. It's The Rock. It's Dwayne Johnson.
Oh.
You know how many times that guy was cut down and told no and bullied and berated and said, you can't do this, you can't achieve this? Pretty sure he used that as motivation. I'm just saying, like, what if that was Schwarzenegger that said that? I can see where he's coming from as well, because, you gotta, if you're dedicated to something, you take that and you feed off of it. I'm a fucking fat schlub that works a 9-to-5 job. We're not talking, like, I think that's the problem we get into when we talk about these situations in these movies. We're not talking about a conventional person living here. If my boss treated me like that, fuck you, I'm leaving, I'm out of here. But it's also, I'm like I said, I work a 9-to-5, and I have a job that I pretty much have to pay bills and kind of eventually a career path, but it's not, I don't have dreams of being something greater. I'm not daring to be great right now. If I were, that's why you're tested. You enter into that.
I think that, the devil's in the details, and you actually already alluded to it, like Andrew's 19. Well, first, so my reading, I read it the opposite way. And not because I disagree with most of the things that you've said. I actually agree with them. But to me, always the question is like, but what is the movie saying? Like, and what are we looking at the end? And to me, especially the close-up of Paul Reiser towards the end is telling you where the movie lies. What
I've created a monster.
Yeah, or well, not even like him, like, but it's like they turned my boy into a monster. I don't recognize this guy that's playing the drums.
Look how they massacred my boy.
Yes, exactly. I think that if you change Paul Reiser's close-up to one of pride, surprise pride, but pride nonetheless, I think that it gets a little murkier how to read the movie. But I think that shot of him kind of tells you, I don't know. Obviously, once the movie's out there, it's no longer up to the filmmaker to tell you how you feel about it. You experience it the way you experience it, So to me, that is kind of like a signifier, that shot to me is it's a tragedy. There's no argument about the level of what an accomplishment Andrew has pulled off at the end, and I think that also there's no argument that Fletcher's methods are in this specific situation are effective, but also there's no argument that they're effective. The question is, I guess, whether they're worth it in the world of the movie, whether they're worth it in this specific scenario. And I think that maybe the movie's greatest achievement, right next to getting J.K. Simmons an Oscar, is that it opens up that conversation. Because again, like I said, the first time I watched it, to me, it was pretty clear. I was like, oh man, that sucks. Like that kid's never going to get from under this guy's boot. It's like his biggest triumph is pleasing him.
It says, fuck you.
But don't you think that in the end, though, because obviously this is like a ridiculous alternative, but it's not like he drummed and then left. He didn't drop the mic or drop the sticks, so to speak. Instead,
there's no time for that.
The movie could have made time.
oh, I see.
But instead he lets Fletcher come in and they commune. They have a moment. They go from being antagonistic during his solo to becoming collaborators.
Yeah, but he takes over his band. And he cues them all, and the way I've always interpreted it is he takes over and he shows him that he's more than he thought he was, or he's made him into this, and that he's now beyond. He's what's the line that Russell Hammond uses? I think he says musically I've outgrown them all, or something like that, and that's what I was thinking of in here. And then, and he just kind of gives him his moment because obviously it means so much to J.K. Simmons. But like I said, obviously there's no way to prove this because there's not Whiplasher or Whiplash 2 or whatever out there. So my idea would be that fucking Neiman got picked up by someone from the JVC Jazz Festival, or someone was there and saw him, was like, all right, you got to come here. And then fucking Fletcher went back to his can of pork and beans at his apartment.
I think that the problem is, not really a problem, but what makes the situation stickier is what you mentioned, that he's 19. He's still, at least the way that we see it, he's still a kid in my mind. And maybe I'm not supposed to see him as a kid, right? But to me, it still looks like an adult taking advantage of a kid.
Yes.
So that makes it harder to buy it as... It doesn't ever look like a balanced, fair situation. This is not, like you were saying, somebody that has decided that they want to sacrifice everything to be the best. Instead, it looks like, somebody that's kind of come to that conclusion, but they're too young to really understand what that means, or and then they have this really strong, toxic figure just kind of telling him, this is how you do it, and this is the only way to do it, and he ends up, alienating everybody else in his life. Obviously, like you said, there's no Whiplash 2, so we don't know what happened after. Maybe he went out and he had a beer with his dad, and his dad's like, man, I didn't know you had it in you. That's awesome. And he never saw Fletcher again. He was like, yeah, I proved myself and I can just, move on with my musical career without worrying about this asshole. But the entire mood of the movie, the way that the story is played out, what we've seen of Andrew's character, what we've seen of Fletcher's character, and what has been established, I guess, by Chazelle as like the rules that this world works under. When we get to the end, I feel, I mean, it's exhilarating, but I also feel like he, like this kid just lost his soul. I mean, again, you know, we all bring our own baggage to a movie when we watch it, and which, you know, again, you know, to me, like I when I watched it the first time, I read it this way, and then wow, it turns out that no, some people read it like me, some people read it like you. You know, Schwarzenegger, like I said, reads it like you. Some people watch it and they're like, oh, this is a movie about the dangers of having somebody that preys on ambitious young people, and you know.
See, it's so funny because that has so much to do with the time period it's made in. You know, Rocky's the same fucking story. Mick just fucking beats the shit out of him, and you know, makes him overcommit to these things that he's doing, and puts him through the ringer, makes him fucking run these hills and beat up these raw beef carcasses, and you know, put himself through absolute hell to not even win, just to go to the decision with Apollo Creed. It's
yeah,
all,
but you can kind of feel like Rocky had, well, two things. One, he was an adult, and also it's like, well, it couldn't get any worse for him, right? Whereas like Andrew is a kid that's full of potential. I mean, there's no way of knowing that. Could he have gotten to that solo through a different, like, this is the only incentive that's going to get him to be great is to be treated like garbage by Fletcher? Or could he have gotten there anyway? You know, it's like the story of whatever, the guy that threw a cymbal at the other musician, you know, it's like, yes, that's something that happened, but is that the only way to get there? You know, how do you know that guy was not going to, you know, end up being a great musician anyway without somebody being hostile toward him? You know, like you said, yeah, I understand that it's like, well, it works. Some people just need that kind of aggressive incentive to really make it. But to make that kind of judgment, you know, when you're the Fletcher character and you're making that kind of judgment, well, you're not really even making that judgment. You're just deciding that you're going to treat everybody that way.
Yeah, that's what makes him a poor coach. He's not a good teacher, and he's not a good instructor, is because he treats everybody that way.
Right. Rocky's trainer, I mean, he knew Rocky. I'm assuming that he figured this is the only way that's going to happen. He's got to punch those beef, those labs of
those
beef.
Frozen beef carcasses. I'm just saying, it's an interesting time period for this movie to be made. I think that's what makes Fletcher the bad guy, like I said, because he's just a dumb, bad coach, because that coaching style does not work for everybody, that way of learning. But to me, it makes it apparent that Neiman is like the one person that finally came into his universe, his grasp, his palm, that is going to respond well to that type of treatment. And it shines through in the end. I think there's more to it. It's not that's necessary. And, you know, I feel like I already need to go back and speak on something I said earlier about bullying works. That I mean that in a very specified to this type of movie sense.
You're not talking about people getting wedgies or...
No. This is obviously a sensitive subject, and I don't want people to think that I have some calloused view on things, but I do think my mind is kind of askew or different from yours in this topic, and that's probably primarily having been around sports and a lot of combat sports my entire life, and seeing how different coaching styles work, and that they yield different results, and sometimes better results from some people with more extreme measures. So, no, I'm not really bothered by the narrative of this movie. I think it shows that the Fletcher character is just a miserable person, and I've already said 1,000 times, a poor instructor and a poor coach, because he doesn't understand that every pupil is different and responds differently. But I think that, like I said, the Neiman character, this is what was needed for him to excel. And I think it does show, if it's Schwarzenegger, whoever said that, what this can bring out of people. And someone like him would fucking know the criticisms and whatnot he went through and the level of success. That dude is the personification of the American dream, as it has been known for the past 50 years, 60 years. So I feel if it was Schwarzenegger that commented on it, he would be valid in doing so. And like I said, Blues the Warmest Colors, another example. It got something out of those actresses that they self-admittedly probably wouldn't have gotten out of them otherwise. And I could make countless sports references, and I could tell you countless sports references and be here all day. I'm not really sure anyone's ever attained greatness just by being told good job. So I kind of understand that monologue that J.K. Simmons has. It's not for everybody, but the elite, the best of the best, I don't think got where they were just by constantly being handed participation trophies.
Well, but I think that that's the extreme, though, right? I mean, you have like participation trophies and you have abusive behaviors as like the two ends of the spectrum.
The goalposts.
Yeah. And then you have a whole world in between to, get people to reach their full potential. I mean, I don't know. I do not have any examples. I guess my belief would be that, just in the case of Andrew, I would like to think the movie doesn't show me otherwise, that he wouldn't have achieved what he ends up achieving on his own or with a different, coaching method or whatever. I mean, like I said, it works. What the movie is telling me is that it did work, but it doesn't really show me. Look, I mean, first off, in case it wasn't clear, I like the movie. I think the movie's great. And I wouldn't want the movie to be this way. But if the movie had shown me Andrew being somebody that was not driven to begin with, right? It's like this guy that wants to be good, but you can tell that he's not good because he's just like, he doesn't practice enough or whatever. And then he meets Fletcher and we see the change. And we're like, wow, he treats him like shit, but he's actually like a better drummer now. Then I think that the movie would be making a clearer point. The movie would be saying like it was necessary for Fletcher to step in. I don't think the movie does that, and that's fine. Actually, like I said, I wouldn't want the movie to do that. I love the fact that we've been having this conversation, and this conversation has been happening since the movie came out, and it can be argued both ways because Chazelle, as a filmmaker, decided to just give us a very it's not hands off, but he doesn't. I don't think that he leans as heavily one way or the other. And that's why when you get to the end, you can have the two very different reads on it. I think that's good. I think that's a good thing in the movie. It doesn't make the movie a bad movie for me. It doesn't make it a bad experience. Like I said, just because I find the ending tragic doesn't mean that I don't enjoy getting there. But I understand that if you are somebody who could read the ending as a celebration or an endorsement of Fletcher's behavior, you could be turned off by when you get to that endpoint. If you've been enduring these characters' behavior, Fletcher being an asshole and Andrew being kind of like a dick also and kind of being self-involved and whatever, and maybe because you're hoping that the ending is gonna, if not give him a comeuppance, at least kind of change their character arc is going to be realizing that, oh, well, I shouldn't have been doing this, or there was a different way to approach it. But instead the ending, what it does is kind of reinforce everything that you haven't been enjoying in the movie or everything that you've been kind of disapproving of during the movie. I can see how that could turn you off. And so as I was flipping through the quotes on Rotten Tomatoes and I was seeing critics who's, at least on the quote, their big complaint was just that the characters were just so despicable, I guess, sort of like unlikable. And I was thinking, well, is it really that you didn't like the characters, or it's just that you didn't like them and the movie ended up disagreeing with you or showing them as triumphant? So I understand, even though it's not how I read the movie, I understand that sort of backlash to it. The one thing that I don't agree with, at all is other quotes, and I didn't really pull any of those, but there were some that were saying that the movie was hollow, that the movie didn't have anything to say. There was all like flash and no substance. And I was like, that's not, I mean, again, this conversation just proved that the movie had a lot going on.
Yeah.
It's not that, at least I don't believe that Damien Chazelle accidentally made a movie that could be read, in such different ways, and that opens the discussion to this sort of complex topic. So when I read that criticism, I'm more likely to go like, I really don't get it. I don't see how you could find this movie superficial.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It was the same year as Foxcatcher, because that's another movie that kind of speaks to that same idea of pushing someone to the physical limit to release their best within. Fortunately, in this movie, no one was shot and killed. But,
I was about to say Foxcatcher is more clearly. Again, I only know from like the movie, and I've seen it only once, but I think that one's more clearly.
It's a bit more demonizing. There's clearly a bad character.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, with Channing Tatum's character in that, there's certain parts in that. No, you should definitely rewatch that. It's great. Steve Carell's a bit off-putting, but I was thinking about it. I was like, okay, so there's examples of when this extreme shit works and doesn't work, and I was trying to think of like if this discussion, if someone came back with an argument. It's like, yeah, it works or it doesn't. But then there's also like, it came to me the example of End of the Century, the Ramones album that was produced by Phil Spector. That's like the one example of like someone putting people, like pushing them to the brink of just emotional distress and like a complete breakdown, and then getting the results. And it was just kind of,
Well, I think that, maybe, I'm not saying that is the wrong approach, but maybe because to me, the question of whether the results are there or not is different from, is it worth it? Like, if we just go with the assumption that the results are always going to be there, right? Like, let's just, in a world where Fletcher's methods always produce greatness, let's just say that,
it's not going to happen.
But okay, well, in the world where
oh, I'm sorry, you're just speaking hypothetically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just for the sake of simplifying the argument, right? If Fletcher's methods always achieve greatness in the long run, again, is it worth it, right? Like the pain of, the humiliation, the alienation from people that love you, the potential psychological damage that you go through when you're doing this, and I guess the answer is, well, that's not a case-by-case scenario, because some people can handle it, some people can't, and some people shouldn't try to handle it. And so I guess to me, like, from my worldview, what it falls back on is like, not did it make you great, but did it make you happy, right? It's like, did the process end up with you as a satisfied human being, or the process end up with you being the best of the best? And I understand that sometimes there's an intersection. You can, being the best of the best makes you a happy human being. But again, I guess it boils down to how you read the ending of the movie, because when I look at Andrew at the end of the movie, I don't see somebody that's happy. I just see somebody that got where he wanted to be, but I don't know that necessarily means that he's happy. But that can be read, multiple ways.
So number one, to clarify, I think End of the Century is a great album. I was more referring to the critical and financial reception to it.
I'm sure there are people that don't think it's a great album, and they're like, why the fuck did they put themselves through it? Dude, but the question is, how do the Ramones feel about it?
Well, unfortunately, no, Marky's still alive, but the other three have passed. It came to me because they talk about it in the absolutely wonderful documentary called End of the Century about the Ramones, where like it drove Johnny to the point of he just said fuck this and he packed up and left. I don't know if they hold it fondly, but I do. It has like Danny Says and Do You Remember Rock and Roll? I think I Want You Around's on there, Rock and Roll High School. But I mean, you spoke to it right there. It's life experiences and the things I've seen, and like the literal people I've known that went through things similar to Andrew in this movie, and then went on to use that to achieve high levels of success. And I guess that's just it. I've literally seen this shit in practice. So it makes me a bit more receptive to the idea of this storytelling, and knowing that they're, happy with where they're at and what they're doing. So it's a little bit different for everybody. This shit doesn't work for everyone. I guess that would mean that this movie's not for everybody, where that's fine. It's not a movie in the sense, like, the music's awesome, but the story that's there is obviously very intense. Some of it lost me. The whole sequence with him getting hit by a car and running to the performance and getting on stage bleeding, and that just became too silly.
It really feels like the movie jumps the shark, sort of, and then the shark jumps back.
Exactly. It was like the movie's like a TV show that they ran that episode and then immediately like redacted what happened in it. They're like, no, never mind. Yeah, because that scene is just it's too, in a movie so grounded in like real feelings and almost like a sense of reality, that it kind of takes it out, and it's like, oh, this is a movie.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, they didn't need to do that, right? I mean, he just needed to be late. All he needs to do is
Exactly.
like, be late, and then Fletcher tells him to fuck off, and then he jumps on Fletcher and gets kicked out of school. That's all you
Well,
need.
see what happened was old Damien was like, fuck, the movie's only 90 minutes long. We got to extend it. We got to extend it by 10 minutes. Come on, let's figure something out.
He misunderstood the Mattis rule. He thought that it meant more than 90 minutes. Less than 90 minutes is not worth it.
It was an interesting time for this movie to be made, and I think even more so with some of the light that's been shed on certain ideologies and topics since. I think if this was even made today, there would be more discussions like what you were explaining to me are some people's reads on this movie. I think it just boils down to people that disagree with certain ideologies and then are given an example like this, rightfully so, feel they have the platform to say, no, that's not how it should be, or I don't like it because of this. So, as we discussed, all great art inspires debate, and I think it's interesting. I honestly came into literally this portion of the podcast not knowing any of these things that you told me, so I learned a lot and enjoyed discussing them.
Sidestepping a little bit to the man behind this, I think we're in agreement that at least just given the evidence so far, Damien Chazelle peaked with Whiplash.
That is a confirmed, good friend. That is a massive 10-4.
That was another big takeaway for me watching this movie again. Having watched La La Land and having watched First Man, which you haven't seen.
I would like to.
It's not a bad movie, but it's no Whiplash. And La La Land, on the other hand, I think it's a bad movie. It's a bad movie with a really good ending, but
I wouldn't even go that far. That movie fucking sucks, dude. Like, I watched that and I was like, I could not believe, because I watched it years after the fact. I probably watched it last year, maybe 2019 or 2018, and I was like, this is what I've been hearing about. And that movie made $500 million or whatever it made. And you want to talk about a movie that has nothing to say? I have no idea how two people could have as intricate a conversation as we just had about Whiplash about La La Land.
My old boss, I remember he used to tell me that he would talk about it in musical terms, and that is that every band's first album was always really good, and then what came after usually wasn't as good because that first album is the one that they've been, in a way, working on for years.
Yep. And
then once they break out, so I guess not necessarily the first album, but, the breakout album. Once they break out, then the pacing changes. And, the next album just comes out like a year later or 2 years later, usually. It's not like something that they've been processing and refining for a decade. So usually the quality drop is noticeable. And I thought of that as I was watching Whiplash, and I was like, I wonder how long, I could be wrong, but I wonder how long Damien Chazelle was working on Whiplash and just like really dreaming about it and thinking of the characters and the scenes and how I'm going to highlight this and how I'm going to structure it. And then it's like, wow, he makes it big. And I was like, fuck, what do I do next? La La Land. I know it's not like that, but it feels like that.
That's a tremendous analogy. Like, it's obviously not the case for all directors, but let me tell you about a guy named Nicholas Winding Refn. But yeah, that's from that same idea. That this, like, it honestly feels like Blink-182. Like, I don't know, you're not nearly the fan of theirs that I am, but like,
patron Dan Brennick is, so watch your words.
Blink-182 is my favorite band of all time, so I'm not going to speak ill of them. But the idea of listening to Cheshire Cat and then listening to Enema of the State back to back, it's like, man, something happened in between these two. And it's like, this is like raw and guttural. And then it's like, there's this really polished thing that feels like it's more meant to appease to everybody and have no controversy to it at all. And that's like Whiplash and La La Land. Blah, blah, bland.
Yep.
Who did you say? Was that John Golson that came up with that?
I think it was John Golson that coined that term.
Shout out to John Golson. So yeah, that's a fantastic analogy to make. Definitely the most I've talked about this movie and thought about it. I guess I'm glad now that I know people think that way about it, so I don't just brazenly speak about it in public about how about how Fletcher was right to treat Neiman the way he did.
Hashtag Fletcher was right. Hashtag justice for Fletcher.
Well, I don't know about all that because, like I said, he was kind of dumb and a poor coach. He just kind of lucked out in the end with this. That's why the movie's there. He lucked out with this one particular student. Absolutely deserving of the Academy Award. J.K. Simmons is phenomenal in this. Like I said earlier, fantastic overall. Ethan Hawke in Boyhood was great, but I know we were big trumpeters of that performance, but I think this was well deserved. The sequence, as I mentioned, with the car crash and that whole thing seems so cartoony that it really does take it down an entire peg for me, and I settle on a B for this movie. Overall, though, I'm a big fan. It just is more ammunition in the Miles Teller canon for me. So I give this movie a B. Julio, how about yourself?
First, I'll say that, I think that Miles Teller is better than most of the movies he makes. I think that's thinking of Fantastic and War Pigs, I guess Project X. I think he's good too. Second, I would say that after your passionate defense of Fletcher's methods, I thought you were going to give this an A.
Oh, no. I more just got like kind of unnecessarily defensive because I think that people can be a bit hypersensitive to things. And I know there's plenty of examples of where shit like this doesn't work and actually creates problems. But when you told me that, I was like, well, the movie proves that this worked for him. So I had to make my point. But no, to Alex, this is not an A movie.
Well, I guess in the ultimate reversal, I'm giving it 5 stars anyway.
Oh,
and yes, the car sequence is ridiculous, but it doesn't matter because especially once you've watched it once, because like I said, it wasn't me doing a bit in Contrarians Corner. I remember thinking that it was some sort of dream sequence at first. That's how out of place it feels. But it's still, man, it's just so good. And even putting aside the discussion that it invites in because of the way it's constructed, I mean, fucking J.K. Simmons' performance is amazing. This is the first time that I've come to terms with him taking the Oscar over Ethan Hawke. Rewatching Boyhood earlier this year and kind of cooling off on it considerably helped, but also just watching his performance again and just seeing him kill it. The music is great, not just Whiplash, just every time the band plays, it's just, and I love the way it's shot, the close-ups of the instruments and the way that it's, I'm glad that they won the Oscar for editing because the way that he puts together those sequences is really good. And Paul Reiser, cherry on top, is just amazing. And even, back then she was not Supergirl. And I remember thinking, man, this girl is great. I wish we'd seen more of her. And now she's had I think 5 seasons on the CW. She's probably set for life. Good for her.
Yeah, we didn't give her propers, but for her little role as Nicole, she was fantastic.
Yeah, the scene when Andrew is breaking up with her and she ends up just, unleashing on him before walking away. That's really good.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, so 5 stars on my end.
All right. So Julio, that concludes Whiplash. What is on deck for our next episode in the new year?
Our first episode of 2021. We're going to start the new year with Titanic. That is an Alex Mattis request. God knows I didn't need to sit through 3 hours of Leo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. As much as I love Kate Winslet. I'm pretty sure you watched it. You probably screened it the way I did when it got re-released.
In 3D?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just remember the trailer said, the trailer for the re-release of Titanic in 3D said, from the visionary director of Avatar. I was like, what? That's so backwards. Titanic is great. I own it on Blu-ray, and I will be excited to watch it. I will watch it in 2 parts, no doubt, much like I did Blue is the Warmest Color. I highly doubt there's going to be a 3-hour movie that I'll just sit through all in one sitting, but it is great. It is so remarkably cheesy and over the top, and I love it. And Julio does not, so it'll be fun.
I do love Kate Winslet, though. And I mean, there are things that I like. I don't know. We'll talk about it. And it's been so long. I might surprise myself after I watch it.
I look forward to it. Now wrapping us up with our plugs, our perennial plugs here on the Contrarians, and we always start with the Festive Years, who provide our opening and closing tracks. They open us up with Last Stand, take us home with Summer of 99. Be sure to head over to thefestiveyears.com for any and all Festive Years needs.
Our logo and all the other graphics that you'll see on our Patreon page and also our upcoming merch. It's from Hans Rothgieser. You can contact him at Mildemonios on Twitter. That's Mildemonios. You can check out his work on his webpage, mildemonios.pe. You can email him if you want to request like logos, comics, you want to talk to him about movies. His email address is mildemonios@hotmail.com. He is a writer, he's a podcaster, he's written a whole bunch of zombie novels. He has 4 podcasts. If you want Hans content, there is Hans content for you. You just have to decide where you start. And his webpage is a good place to do so.
And as always, many thanks and much appreciation to Zoe Perez for helping us with our social media posts, specifically on Instagram, making so many nice, shiny, pretty posts for all our fans, and some interactive things too. It is greatly appreciated, the work you do for us, Zoe.
All right, so thank you once again, Kate and Oti, for the pick. I don't know if Real Talk went in the direction that you guys expected. But I'm pretty sure that if nothing else, as you guys predicted, Contrarians Corner was probably something you enjoyed since we talked trash about Whiplash.
Katie and OT, thank you. That was a hell of a time discussing that movie. But that is going to conclude this episode of The Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong, and we will catch you next time.